Welcome to Unexpected Points. I have a very special guest, Marcel, Louis-Jacques. We are going to talk everything Dolphins, who he covers for ESPN, including Mike McDaniel, the Tua situation, what's going to go on in the draft and free agency. But let's get right to it. All right. Thank you, Marcel, for joining me. First off, let's do the small talk portion of the podcast here. So the last time you joined me was during the 2020 season. You were covering the Buffalo Bills. Now you're in Miami. So I did notice that the progression of your career, I believe, had gone from, at least in the last few stops, Arizona to Charlotte up to Buffalo. So I want to congratulate you on heading back down into the warm area here. And I'm sure that was a little bit of a factor in your decision.
Yeah, also some stops in Texas, South Carolina,
Okay.
before Charlotte. I mean, it's just a big line, big smiley face, and then down, throughout the course of my career. But no, man, it's been cool. I always joke that, when I'm back home, I'm actually in California right now, hence the Sacramento heavy backdrop. But I always joke that I'm wearing t-shirts in February. I haven't done that in 3 years, so I can appreciate the warm weather. And it's never boring. I'll tell you that. It has never been boring since I moved down
Yeah.
here.
Well, it's going to be an interesting offseason, I think, for the Dolphins in particular. The Bills, you helped them ascend basically to where they are now. So if you could sprinkle some of that same magic down in Florida. So I kind of gave you the agenda beforehand. I wanted to talk Coach Mike McDaniel first, being that it's kind of the most recent news, and I'm kind of going to try to use you as a vessel a little bit to be my nerd self here, and maybe critique a little bit of his model analytics talk, his running the football talk. And I know that you had the chance to sit down with him kind of one-on-one. So maybe we will start big picture. I'm not sure he was in the running for any other positions here, but he has been a name that people have known about because he's part of the Shanahan tree. He's like LaFleur got his gig. And then if you look at Robert Saleh had come off of there, and then others that everyone worked together. Everyone who was a coach in the National Football League all worked on the Washington football team back in 2013. So he's part of that thing, but I don't think he was necessarily like a top coaching candidate coming into this. What was your impression of how he was viewed even before the process started?
No, this was somebody who, I became more aware of as the Dolphins coaching search began. What really caught my attention was, I think, the same thing that caught the casual football fans' attention was the charismatic, joke-filled, interview and press conferences that he was doing with the 49ers media over Zoom. And so then started looking at his background. That's when I found out that, yeah, he was part of that, that NFL Rat Pack, I guess we're going to call it, or whatever Leonardo DiCaprio's like
yeah, exactly.
It's called.
Yeah.
Like that version of the or that in the NFL. But he is for as young, and I guess kind of like, I don't know if unknown is the right word, but when I say that, I mean just he's not really a household name. He wasn't really a household name moving into this process. He is experienced. Like he's been around the league for a long time. And for the people who question and wonder, like, why is he a head coach? How can he do this? Like he's paid his dues. I mean, he's only got that 1 year of offensive coordinator title, but he has been on, I think it's 7 different teams now. He's been in the league one way or another since 2004, I believe, 2005. This isn't somebody who's just new to the game. And he's very smart. Everybody I've spoken with about him, they speak directly about his football acumen. They call him a genius. He looks like one. He's got that startup disruptor techie look. You know what I mean? Like the zip up hoodie and jeans. When we sat down last week, same thing. Zip up hoodie, jeans, nice watch, Christian Louboutin red bottoms too. That I think cannot be slept on.
You're paying attention to the details.
Cannot be slept on there. Like he knows how to dress. It's not like it's not like he doesn't. He's so out of touch in the fashion world. But I think he's the kind of guy who like his mind moves like 1,000 miles an hour, and his mouth can only move maybe 50 miles an hour or 100. You know what I mean? Like I think that it's going so fast up here that when you hear maybe the ums or the stutters or like the I guess kind of weird tangents, I think that's what's going on. Like it's not necessarily that he's awkward. And if you're around like people who are just really, really, really smart like that, they all kind of speak the same way. And that like, yeah, he's got 10,000 miles going on up here and is trying to kind of like formulate how to say it out loud. And that's at least that's the impression that I've gotten from him the
Yeah.
couple times I've been able to sit down and speak with him. But former players rave about him. I think that says a lot. George Kittle was trying to work into his contract that they can keep Mike McDaniel on staff. I think obviously he wasn't serious, but it's a fun gesture. It's a nice gesture. But yeah, man, I'm really kind of fascinated in how this is going to work. He's got his work cut out for him on offense. There's not really a ton to build on, as I'm sure we'll touch on during this podcast. But I'm really intrigued with how he's going to kind of manufacture some production here, because save a massive spending spree this offseason, there's just not like a lot to work with on that side of the ball as currently constructed.
Yeah. There's gonna be a lot of moves, and like you mentioned, we'll get into some of that. I mean, I think he got onto my radar just a little bit, not much. A number of years ago, Andrew Hawkins, I think, was one of his big backers. I think maybe they had worked together when he was in Cleveland, and he talked about how smart McDaniel was at that point. And you mentioned the thoughts in front of the words coming out, and maybe this is part of why when I was listening to some of his answers about analytics in particular, that's we're gonna have to touch on that subject. I was putting some stuff out there about some of his answers, which I wasn't that happy about. But I think even in his press conference, there did seem to be this. I don't know if it's awkwardness, but it's not this gravitas sort of presidential demeanor that's going on. And I know that it probably plays better maybe in a one-on-one type of atmosphere than it does in some of these interviews or some of these other settings where it's just sometimes it came across like he didn't have an answer planned out for some questions that you think you should know that these questions are going to come in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and my first impression, or what I kind of thought, I thought he just was a little bit nervous. That's how it seemed at first, and it was understandable because I mean it's a guy who's kind of been tucked away on that San Francisco coaching staff for the past 5 years. He hasn't had to do a whole lot of these like big setting interviews. Like, so I'm not gonna attack somebody or knock somebody for being nervous in that kind of situation. But the more, like I said, I got to I spoke to people about who he is. The more I got to talk to him, I realized that no, I think he's just the kind of person where mind is moving 100 miles an hour, mouth is moving maybe half of that. So I think the Dolphins PR staff is, I'm sure they prepared him for everything that he would have to answer. I don't know if anything was necessarily a surprise for him that day, but I think it might have been a matter of, again, like he's just thinking of so many things to say in that scenario that maybe what exactly he meant isn't what came out of his mouth. No, man, it's like, and I think maybe there's this unfair expectation because all that we've seen, all the public outside of San Francisco out of that beat have seen are the jokes and the anecdotes and the Mike Jones drops and that's we kind of like that's all we see, that's all we know of him, that's all we think he is, and that's kind of an unrealistic expectation for him, right? To be just dropping gemstones like that with every single answer. I think maybe there was just weird expectations or maybe too lofty expectations.
I was telling you earlier, I grabbed the Mike Jones drops here that we could use maybe another time. Now, tell me if you can hear this, because I'm going to try to play here a clip of when he was talking about the hashtag analytics here. And then maybe I'll explain a little bit why I wasn't enthralled with the answer. And then, I got to recruit you to poke at him when these things happen, and being from the Shanahan. So let me see if this plays through a second here when I play this.
I tend to try to really focus on the numbers that are right.
Well, this is a joke here at first.
No.
Here, so this is personality.
It's a useful tool, but like anything else, you can't take anything as an absolute. So you take in the information, like, hey, I understand why it's overtime. You should probably go for it on fourth down here, but you also, my opinion, you have to be careful to do anything in absolutes, and you have to understand, okay, what's the situation, what's the time of the clock, how's our defense playing, what if we give the ball back, all of these factors. So it's a tool like anything else, but you use it with every other piece of information to try to make the best decision.
Now, so that's like, I think your average football fan, and many people who try to quote tweet and yell at me when I critique this will think of that like it makes sense, right? You say there's information, you don't go with it. You don't go with the fourth down bot every single time exactly what this says, but you take it in and you use that information. Now I'll say the reason that I'm a little bit skeptical when I hear these answers, I guess it's a couple different things. Number one, when I think of analytics, and I know that it's funny, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who's now the GM with the Vikings, he said he doesn't even like to use the word because it's become more about like who's doing it, or like a model versus a way of thinking, like a way of just being kind of like thoughtful and intentional in what you're doing. So when he's describing it, I think he thinks analytics means like a computer model is analytics basically. And I guess when I think about it more, I think what it is you're trying to come up with like the best decision. And if you're going to say to yourself, it's 4th and 2 from the 40-yard line with so much time left and they have the ball and there's so many timeouts, like trying to figure out in your head what that means is difficult. There's a lot of information to parse through there. I mean, you have some personal experience. Now you can use a model to come up with an estimate, but then another part of kind of like this general way of thinking isn't just taking exactly what it says. It's saying like, well, if you're thinking, oh, my offensive line's not playing well, then it's, researching in advance those types of situations to figure out, well, if the offensive line isn't playing well, how much of an effect does it have? How much should it change our decision, and so on and so forth. So I guess maybe that's my number one critique, is just to say like analytics is this thing, this like model, as opposed to more of like an overarching philosophy of like, we want to be thoughtful about everything. And being thoughtful means not just taking in a model's input and then, going with your gut. It means like using that with other information and studying what's the best decision based upon all those things, and not just making that decision in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Like not just, and I'm trying to, I don't know if I'm qualified as a Mike McDaniel whisperer quite yet, but
Okay.
I think, yeah, I would imagine that's kind of what he's going for, that like, oh, you can't like use it, you're not just going to say, okay, well, like you said, like this imaginary computer is spitting out decisions for us, and we're just going to do what that means or what that says every time. He's trying to like say, okay, it's a nuanced or a more nuanced decision than that.
Yeah.
So I guess you're fighting back against the idea that analytics is just, like you said, this like sentient computer in the back of the coach's box that
I think it's like it's kind of conflated. Like the idea of thinking analytically is conflated with like this model, which is a tool that, and the reason that the tool is used is because it's better than you can't digest all this information and come up with an exact, win probability in all these different situations. So that's the reason that it's used. It's not like because you should always just take exactly what the numbers. And I guess my thing is like, I've just seen too much from Shanahan, and maybe McDaniel will be different. I mean, I was a little bit skeptical of someone like Dan Campbell coming into this year, but he seems to have been pretty good about these decisions. But just sometimes Shanahan, like for instance, in the against the Rams in that playoff game, I think there was I don't remember, it was 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 near the end where they ended up, not going for it, punting. But it was one of these situations where, according to the models, you would have gone for that on 4th and 6, maybe even. Like, it's really a stretch. So there's not really any sort of thing. Like, if you studied what may have been different about this particular moment than the inputs that are going into something like that, if you study that, you'd know that it's just too overwhelming of an advantage to ignore. And when he was asked about it after the game, he was kind of like, no, I didn't consider doing it. So I guess that's what I'm scared of, is this idea of you take that and then you just combine it with the gut to make the decision, as opposed to you take that and then you also think in this kind of like thoughtful, methodical way around that to come up with the decision.
I'm curious, how much of some coaches, I guess, hesitance to rely, quote unquote, on analytics is, I mean, ego driven, like thinking, oh, I can't, like, you think like I can't make this decision myself, like I'm an NFL coach or I'm an NFL head coach, like I know the game, I'm smart enough to know X, Y, Z. And I guess maybe I'm wondering if that's the divide, between people who recognize it as a tool to make them better and those who maybe view it as a crutch or I don't know, a crutch, a cheat code, a gimmick. Like, I don't know. I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but yeah, like you said, it is an overwhelming. It's too overwhelming of an advantage not to use. Teams that are able to utilize it properly, and coaches who are able to utilize it properly, like they have an advantage. Like, there's not really much to add to it. And I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to be the McDaniel whisperer here.
Yeah.
But I am wondering, like, is that what he meant to say? Because I mean, if I'm correct, like he's answered that question a couple times in more or less like the same way.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. He kind of said it in the similar way. Actually, he was mentioned with Brandon Staley, and he's kind of like, he was about to say he's the opposite philosophy of Brandon Staley, but then he kind of caught himself and didn't quite say that, and then said, this is one of these like McDaniels-isms where he's like, I am an absolutist about not taking anything as an absolute or something like that. I was like, I don't know if I know what that means, but okay, I kind of get what you're saying there. So this is another pet peeve sort of thing here. Another thing that I think is interesting is, I think you're right. It's kind of like this outside force. Like, they see this analytics thing as like this outside force that's impinging upon their autonomy as like a head coach and what they can do. Because if you're going to ask a head coach about anything that could potentially be of value to the team, not as many coaches are doing this as what McDaniel did there. But if you notice, like in his answer, when they ask him, like, is analytics valuable? He'll be like, analytics is valuable, but, and then he spends the next like 2.5 minutes saying why it's not necessarily that great of a thing. Whereas, if you're going to ask him, like, how valuable is scouting, he's not going to be like, well, scouting's valuable, but you got to make sure you're not doing this, and you got to make sure you're not taking the scouts too seriously. You got to make sure your scouts aren't this, that sort of thing. So I do think it's like this outsiderism basically coming in, and maybe that's where the skepticism comes from also.
I can see that. And I mean, as somebody who works heavily with analytics and in analytics and is well versed in that part of the game, then like I can see where you would take a little umbrage to it, like, and say like, well, hold on a second, like let's not detract from its helpfulness here. Like, let's not join the dog pile on the analytical community. I think I see what you're saying here. And I don't know. Like I said, I feel like as he does more of these and does this media tour and gets used to his thoughts being broadcasted, I think he will learn how to maybe make his point a little more concisely and not kind of like, I don't want to say ramble because that has such a negative connotation, but like not speak so off the cuff.
Maybe. Yeah. I think he's just he is thinking out loud a little bit in a way. Yeah.
And so like the longer you speak, like the longer you go for, the greater chance of you saying something that like is going to get pushback, So like, I think that's like a lesson for him to just like learn when rambling goes wrong.
Well, I guess the proof will be
saying he's wrong, but
Yeah. The proof will be when he's actually making these decisions, and we'll see what's happening. But it's on my radar. It's on my radar at least a little bit. If only because like these things that he's mentioning that you have to consider. It's like, yeah, well, those are kind of like in the model, honestly. Like those things that you mentioned are also we can account for those a little bit. But how about, okay, let's just go straight to talking about Tua then, because I think this is the whole thing, right? It's McDaniel coming in. He is the maximizer, right? Or Shanahan is kind of like the maximizer. So the thought would be that he can be this maximizing guy too. It's weird to say, but in a way, in a career that had, maybe was struggling a little bit for Aaron Rodgers. Like when LaFleur came to Green Bay, he even, in a way, if you can say you maximize Aaron Rodgers, I think getting back-to-back MVPs is kind of maximizing Aaron Rodgers. And we've seen Shanahan maximize, anyone from Garoppolo to CJ Beathard to Nick Mullins to Matt Ryan winning an MVP with Shanahan in the past. So is this connection here? Is this Tua thing? I know we've seen the calls on the airplane and everything else. Is this, what do you think about this connection? And is there this thing in the background still? Is there still all this chatter with, what may happen with looking for another quarterback? Of course, the big name out there being Deshaun Watson.
I think that conversation should probably die off in Miami this year. I think that they are committed to Tua. They need a better backup quarterback. They need somebody who, they need a CJ Beathard or a Nick Mullins or somebody who can like just at least keep the ship afloat if Tua gets hurt, which he often does. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago on a show in South Florida and got a little bit of blowback for it, like thinking like, why do we need to replace Tua? Why do we need a high-end backup? Why do we need to light a fire under him? Because he gets hurt a lot. And Jacoby Brissett was not capable of keeping that offense afloat. Like as fun as a person as Jacoby was, he was not a good quarterback last year. So I think they need to add that to the room. But Tua's good qualities, like what does, the positives, when we talk about the pros of Tua, you can work with it if you're a coach, if you're an offensive coach. He's accurate, he can make decisions quickly, his release is fast. Like it's a matter of, can he process the field fast enough to run this offense efficiently? But I don't know if McDaniel is big on yak. He's mentioned it several times. I don't know if his offense is so predicated on pushing the ball down.
Because that's not Tua's forte. As much as Dolphin fans don't want to hear it, yes, he is capable. He's
capable of completing a 45, 50, whatever yard pass. But there's a windup. It takes a lot of arm strength, and sometimes the ball hangs. Like it does. It's not on a rope per se. But either way, like he is accurate in that intermediate range. So I think it's less about Tua right now and more about what they can fit, what they can fill around him. What more can they add around him? Jalen Waddle is a great piece. I think that we're really going to see him unlocked in 2022. But beyond that, the Dolphins are full of possession pass catchers. Devontae Parker, not a guy who traditionally creates a lot of separation, but a guy who can win a 50-50 ball more often than not. Preston Williams can't really even get on the field and is a restricted free agent. I'm not sure he's worth discussing in this right now. Mike Gesicki, he might be able to scrape a couple yards together after the catch, but still more of a possession, moving change kind of guy. So it's a matter of, can they find the proper talent to surround him with to really showcase his skill set. But after this year, I've been calling this a make or break year for Tua, because they do have to make a decision on that fifth-year option after the 22 season. And, from what we've seen over the past couple of seasons, he's been fine. He's been fine. I don't know if he's a guy that gets a second contract, though, so far. And so this is the year for him to show people, like, no, I do deserve that second contract. Like, I do deserve that fifth-year option. I do deserve to have this team continue to financially build around me. And I think it's going to be, he's got a lot of work to do this offseason, but, he's healthy. There's a little bit of stability. There's a little less drama than there have been in the previous two off seasons. I think it'll be how he shows up to, OTAs and training camp, I think will be, it'll be telling as far as what kind of season he's about to have.
Yeah. What I find interesting about Tua is, like, I'm probably part of this also, is that I think he is viewed in a way that's a bit differently. I mean, talking about your time in Buffalo, like Josh Allen was not very good his first 2 seasons. He was, I would say he was kind of poor his first season. He improved pretty dramatically in his second season, but still we're talking about maybe league average-ish sort of quarterback play before making this explosive jump. But excuse making for someone like that, who at least in his first year, in his second year, to also didn't really have great weapons. They started to build the offensive line around him after a couple of years. Like, I feel like if you're going to look at those sorts of issues, so those sorts of excuses that can be put around a quarterback like Josh Allen, or maybe even Carson Wentz when he was younger, or one of these guys that you think has this high upside because of this unbelievable physical talent sort of thing. I mean, Tua has the worst pass protection in the NFL, according to our numbers, according to pretty much everything you look at. I think ESPN's own pass block win rate worse in the NFL. You mentioned the receivers. They, as a rookie that was very productive, at least on a reception basis, not necessarily like stretching the field or things like that. And then other names that are also around. Like, if you had this same supporting cast around Josh Allen for his first 2 seasons, people would, pitchforks would be coming after you if you suggested that they should move on from someone like Josh Allen. But Tua doesn't get that. Is that because of just what we see from him and maybe not having that upside? Is he just the guy where you're just scared of what that ceiling is?
So they're kind of like, Tua and Josh Allen are opposites in this way. The first 2 years, Josh Allen did not pass the statistical test. But if you watch Josh Allen play, he passed the eye test. He had,
right.
There were moments where, like the Cowboys game on Thanksgiving in 2019, like there were throws that he makes throughout that season that make you say, "Oh wow!" Like, okay, there's special arm talent there at the very least. Like, the rest of the stuff is up here, the decision making and knowing when to say die and yada yada.
Well, I guess he was running too, right? So he was a better runner also. Yeah. So he had that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But the stats were bad. He's completing 50 some odd % of his passes. Like,
right.
He had a massive jump, from year 1 to year 2. And I think it was like, he was still completing under 60% of his passes. So but with Tua, like, the numbers are, he passes the stat test. He's efficient. I think 7th in the NFL in completion percentage last year. His TD to interception ratio is fine. Like, they're not eye popping, but they're not like, oh my God, this is awful. Like we were saying, Josh Allen rookie year. But when you watch him play, he doesn't necessarily, it doesn't pass the eye. He doesn't wow you. He hasn't had any, off the top of my head, I can't think of a whole lot of plays from the last season where I looked at him make that throw and was like, oh wow, that was special. Like, I look at the throw and I think, I don't know how many other quarterbacks in the league can make that throw. Like, Josh Allen was making throws even when he was bad. He was making throws that were like, yeah, there's like 3 guys in this game who can do that. My good friend Charles McDonald and I, when we were talking about it, he used this, and I've said it 100 times since. Tua has shown flashes of competence, but not necessarily flashes of brilliance. And he is a competent NFL starter. I think we can say that, but you're not really looking for competent when you get the number 5 pick. And so I think that you're looking for a couple more of the wow plays, a couple more of the flash from Tua, a couple more things that are, special beyond just like, wow, yeah, he's really accurate in the intermediate to short range. But at the same time, like you mentioned that, yeah, he doesn't get that same leash that maybe Josh Allen got. But I think he's kind of been done in by the rapid development of so many other quarterbacks in the NFL. Like Joe Burrow was special, is special in year 2. Justin Herbert was special almost as soon as he touched the field. Lamar Jackson was good in excellent his first full season as a starter. MVP his first season as
unanimous MVP. Yeah.
Pat Mahomes MVP in his first full season as a starter.
Yeah.
So I think like we've been sort of groomed. Even Baker Mayfield in his first year, we're thinking, oh wow, like okay, that's why Cleveland took him number 1 overall. Like it was a little of a surprise on draft day, but I think we've been groomed to expect instant success from guys, and maybe not everybody can be special right away. Maybe some guys need to slow cook a little more than others. Granted, this is the NFL; it's a business. You can't cook forever, but I think 2 seasons is 2 seasons is about long enough for as a quarterback for you to figure this league out and for you to respond to how the league figures you out, if that makes sense. I think that this is his year. He has to be able to show something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think there's probably, I mean, you don't want to rely too heavily upon the 49ers connection, but if you think about someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Garoppolo, again, he's not wowing anyone. He's not throwing outside the numbers, which takes a little bit more arm strength. He's not generally, if very rarely, throwing downfield, but that offense has been really productive in a way where, I think he averaged the most yards per attempt this season. He has more mistakes in terms of interceptions, but he generates the after the catch stuff. He's willing to throw it, risky throws into the middle and generate kind of high production. He's like, he generates value, whether or not you like it or not. So I feel like that is a path that Tua could go on if he can execute this type of offense, that he could go and have that sort of value. But, at a certain point, even Kyle Shanahan, who had gotten good production out of Jimmy Garoppolo, who got a really good record-wise out of Jimmy Garoppolo, decided to, cash in 3 years of first-round draft picks to look for his replacement. So then the position comes, if you can say like Tua can become as productive as someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe better, I don't know. But are you just delaying the inevitable point where you hit the wall and you say, if we want to get to that next level, we're going to have to upgrade on that? And so therefore, should you be making that decision even earlier than you would otherwise, unless you're content to be like, we're a team that just wants to make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, and look, not to keep name dropping here, but Mina Kimes, noted smart person, told me this a couple months ago, that it's not so much comparing Tua to guys who are not available, like comparing Tua to like Burrow and Herbert and Allen and yada yada. It's comparing Tua to guys who are available. So when you look at Tua compared to the guys coming out in this draft class, I think you choose Tua, then that's that. Like I'm not going with a rookie, and then I'm not cashing in the picks that it would need to move up from number 29.
They're not in a great spot too, right? Yeah, they're not in a great spot.
Yeah, like I'm not getting rid of multiple first round picks to go draft. With all due respect, I'm just throwing a name out here, to go draft Matt Corral or to go draft Carson Strong. You know what I mean? Like or even really Malik Willis. Like I don't think any of these guys in this draft, any of these passers in this draft, you can definitively say this is worth parting ways with multiple first round picks to move up for. Like that's not going to happen. As far as starting caliber quarterbacks that are available free agency or via trade, so you're looking at maybe Rodgers or Russell Wilson or he who should not be named in Houston. Yeah. Like, yes, on the field, these are all decisively better options than Tua. Like it's not even an argument. If we were going to say Aaron Rodgers or Tua, Russell Wilson or Tua, it's like we're not going to spend much time debating that. But realistically, like it's like Tua versus Jimmy Garoppolo, Tua against or Andy Dalton, Tua or Teddy Bridgewater or Tyrod Taylor, guys like that, or even Tyler Huntley. Like I still think Tua is winning those head-to-head battles. So I think it when you consider who they can realistically bring on board, it's worth it to stick with Tua at least for another year. And the way I see it is if he develops, like people thought he would develop on draft night, then you found a quarterback. Like you're good here. And you enter into year 2 in your system, he knows it, he's comfortable, and he should be able to lead you to the playoffs. If he's not good, well, then you've got 2 first-round picks in 2023. It's slightly better quarterback class. Then you can make a move for another for his replacement. Like then you can start to figure out what's our future really looking like at this position. But right now, delaying the inevitable. Maybe that's one way to look at it, but I think it's probably more accurate to say he's the best option right now. Like he's going to be their best option, their best realistic option in 2021 or 2022. Let's just see what you can do with it. Like it's more of an evaluation than prolonging the inevitable.
Yeah, no, it's true. Now you mentioned the injury angle, so that's something that's important from a backup standpoint. But even then, I guess maybe this also goes into how do you approach the backup quarterback position? Because you could say we're not like bringing someone in to directly compete for the starting position, but you can bring someone in to A, be your injury hedge risk, or B, if things don't go so hot in the first half of the season, something like that. If you're pretty decided that maybe he's not the future, maybe you want to look for someone who's a backup who has some unknown type of quality to them that you could learn about or bring forward. So what about those two decisions versus each other? Because I guess if you go with a little bit more unknown type, let's say, I'm not that well versed on this quarterback class, but let's say they did draft someone who slips to the end of the first round, who's not necessarily like going to take over, or maybe the second round or the third round. But the problem is if Tua gets injured, that could be a total complete flop, right? And then the team goes down, as you talked about with Jacoby Brissett. Or you could say, I don't know, like, what about if they bring in, I feel bad who said, what if you like bring in like Mitch Trubisky or someone like that, like, I think the problem bringing in Mitch Trubisky is people will already be talking about quarterback controversy from like day one, a little bit too much than they should. But at least it is an option of someone you could turn over to where it's like within the realm of human possibility that he could be better than Tua maybe as an option for next season.
Yeah, I think it's that you've got to find that happy line, between in backups between, okay, this guy's clearly a backup. And nobody's going to question it. And this guy's a backup, but he might push you for your job. And I think Trubisky is the might push you for your job type of backup. I think that his whole point in going to Buffalo was to rebuild his value as a starter. I think some team maybe that's between quarterbacks was going to find, is going to bring him in to bridge that gap. But that's where I think the Mullins and the Beathards and the Gardner Minshews maybe of the world are maybe more of a fit, guys who can come in and put up digits for like a game or two. Not a guy who you could really rely on for over the course of the season to win you games, but a guy who can come in a pinch and run that offense pretty seamlessly. I think it's of greater importance than Dolphins fans are willing to admit. Mm-hmm. And, maybe it wouldn't hurt, if one of these guys who falls, just below that threshold, maybe it wouldn't hurt to have a guy who could conceivably push to a start if he starts to struggle in the middle of the season, or if he is actively, if he's actively not helping them win games, if he's losing them games, if his play is a reason why the Dolphins are bad as a whole. Then maybe it wouldn't hurt to have a guy, in the quarterback room who can maybe add a little spark to that offense. I think it's about that time where like, I'm not necessarily ready to abandon ship quite yet, but like, I want to find a life preserver. Like I want to make sure I have a life jacket on. I want to know where the boats are. I want to make sure that they're working and, in order. Have they been tested this year, or have they just been hanging off the side of the boat for the past 2 decades? You know what I mean? Like I want to start making sure I'm going to survive if the ship takes on water. I'm not ready to jump, but there's some water at the bottom of the boat that makes me like moderately uncomfortable.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard. I mean, I feel bad. Maybe this is like indictment of Tua in a way, but I feel like even if you bring in like a Gardner Minshew, there'll be like some buzz about it for some reason. It's so bad. It's like, it's hard to say. Or if you, I mean, obviously I mentioned like Trubisky, someone who was kind of, a little bit of a punchline a couple of years ago, could fill that same sort of role. So we'll see. But I think the first thing they have to do, and this is what they'll say for all these different quarterbacks, what they're going to say about Joe Burrow, what they said about Herbert, before him, Josh Allen, everything else, they have to kind of build around him a little bit more. According to numbers that I've looked at, the Dolphins have about $65 million in effective cap space. You mentioned the draft. Yeah, they have the 26th pick from the 49ers. They have the second round pick. They have a compensatory pick from the 49ers in the third round, and then a couple of fourths. And it's so pretty kind of averages sort of draft capital. Everyone knows about the offensive line, everything else. and the cap space is there. But generally, when you spend in free agency, you're not necessarily getting like a return 3-4 years out on the road. It's more like you're really going in here. Is this an ownership that's going to want to push some chips in here that they have to really push this team forward?
Yeah, I think Stephen Ross sees a lot of talent on this roster right now. Like, I think that, and I mean, winning 19 games over the past 2 years, like, yeah, you're good enough to win games. Like, you need some sort of shot in the arm to get yourself into that next tier in the AFC, to get yourself into the playoffs. You only missed it by a year, and this offense was just not good at all. So, like, I think spend the money to improve that offensive line, spend the money on a playmaker, swing for the fences. Can you get a Chris Godwin? Can you get Devontae Adams? I don't know, man. Devontae wants a ton of money. The Dolphins can afford it.
Yeah,
you can afford it. Yeah, you got a lot of guys who, a lot of the foundation of this team. They're either on rookie deals or they're already locked up. They're already signed. I think you can afford to maybe go for broke here. It's kind of a matter of, does Devontae Adams care more about money or Super Bowl contention? In that draft, you can also, use some draft capital to get some playmakers. Wide receivers have been, over the past few years, get them out the box, plug them in, they're ready to go. Like we've seen some special playmaking talent over the past several years. We'll see if McDaniel and Chris Greer can identify a couple in this draft. I'm a little hesitant to use draft capital on offensive linemen if I was this regime, because they have spent 4 top 100 picks on offensive linemen over the past few seasons. I mean, you look at Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson, Michael Dieter, Robert Hunt, Robert Hunt. These are all guys who were taken in the first 2-3 rounds. Like, they have invested the capital. So one of two things is going to be true here. Either one, these guys are not that good, and your scouting staff is not able to identify talent, or two, your coaching staff has not developed said talent. So, like, I think they're going to have to find out which category each lineman fits into. They brought on, they're bringing on offensive coaches, specifically Frank Smith, the new offensive coordinator, who have histories of developing offensive linemen. So I think that's kind of tipping their hand there, that they think, these guys are better than what previous regimes have been getting out of them. But no, like, I don't think this is they're in that weird, like, limbo space in the league where they're not bad enough to tank and rebuild, but, like, they're not good enough to say, like, oh, we're only a couple pieces away. Like, I think that they need to make some moves, man. Like, they need to make some high impact moves this offseason in order to get to that next level. They can't afford to just, like, kick back and chill and say, yeah, we got a lot of money, but we don't really need to spend it. We're good as is. Mike McDaniel, he's going to fix everything. Like, no, they need talent, man. Like, you can only scheme that Washington staff with McVay, with LaFleur, with McDaniel, with Shanahan all on it. Like, that's 4 future head coaches on an offensive staff. And outside of the RG3 year, those offenses stunk. So, like, you can have all the genius in the world, like, you still need talent at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the draft being a place to go after another receiver. I mean, you saw guys, again, if you want to go back to San Francisco, we saw Deebo Samuel be pretty good in his rookie season. We saw Brandon Ayuk be pretty good in the second half of his rookie season too. He had some health issues in his first season, but these are guys who specialize on yards after the catch probably can integrate in a little bit better. But you go for the defensive side of the ball, the defense, which has been good, right? The defense has been quality. It's been what's driving the team here. I mean, you still have big cap numbers. I mean, it's basically Byron Jones and Xavier Howard are, each of them are about 16 million each on their cap. Jerome Baker is another 9 and change. And then we get down to Devontae Parker and Tua and others. So it's kind of like a very top heavy sort of structure that they have there, but they're going to need to build pieces around. I mean, how much do you think they need to worry on the defensive side of the ball of not not concentrating too much on the offensive side and then allowing what has been the strength of the team to degrade a little bit around those big chess pieces that they have at cornerback.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a misconception about the Dolphins now, is that like this defense is just, don't touch it, it's fine. Like,
yeah,
only look at offense. Like, Emmanuel Ogbah is an unrestricted free agent. He's their sack leader of the past 2 years. I believe nine and a half sacks in each of the past couple seasons. He's an integral part of their rush. They need to bring him back. Spot track has his value at, I think, like 10 a year. That is, if they get him at 10 a year, then he took the world's largest hometown discount for no reason for a team that has a ton of money. It just doesn't make sense. He's going to be closer to that 15 million range year, 15 million a year range. But I think he's good enough and he's active enough at the line of scrimmage that he's worth the money. So bring him back. They're good at safety with Holland and Brandon Jones. I think that's a really exciting safety tandem that I think the league, maybe talks about a little bit more this coming season. They are so versatile in that, like, they can play in the box, they can play, traditional deep covers, they can play over the top. They'll line them up on the line of scrimmage, they'll blitz their safeties. Like, you just never really know what they're going to do with them. It's kind of like how how the Bills used Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Like, they're so interchangeable that it's kind of exciting to watch. Obviously, a ton of money invested in the cornerback position. I don't know how sustainable that is, just because it's so unorthodox in the NFL to put $33 million into that. And Xavier Howard deserves more, but so that figure is going to skyrocket if he gets what he wants. They do need help at linebacker. They need depth. They need speed in the middle of the field. Wouldn't be surprised, depending on how the board falls, wouldn't be shocked to see them go linebacker in the first round, depending on who's there. Kid from Utah specifically, if nobody jumps on him, if he inexplicably drops, then he might be wearing aqua and orange in the fall. But they still need to add speed, I think, on that, in that part of the field. Landon Roberts and Jerome Baker, they're specifically Baker, they're good players, they're fine players. They're not much in pass coverage though. And, I think that's why I think you saw some tight ends take advantage of them, when they did play against pass catching tight ends, specifically when looking at Kyle Pitts, tore them apart. Just nobody really is able to match up with them. And then sneakily, man, that nickel corner position is wide open right now. Nick Needham and Justin Coleman are both free agents. If I'm Greer, I bring Nick Needham back. I think he's been impactful whenever he's on the field these past few years. But, that's still, it's a position of need because they don't have anybody on roster right now that I would say they're comfortable with starting at nickel corner. So they got to make a decision on Coleman and Needham. They've got to make a decision on, I know we're jumping into special teams a little bit, but Matt Collins as well, wide receiver, came through with a lot of big plays for them on offense. But special teams, the guy is a star. Like, I think, worthy of Pro Bowl consideration as a gunner. So, they have some moves to make outside of just improving the offense. But improving the offense is like that's the most prevalent goal. That's the shiny little objective that everybody's focused on. But there is more work to do outside of that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for guys like Ogbah in particular because he was, I guess he probably played through his contract initially with the Browns before did he go to Kansas City first before going to the Dolphins? I can't remember. But so he's been like a productive sort of guy, but he's also a guy you could put into a bucket where, like, if you look at what the Patriots have always done, they'd never or rarely would sign one of these guys to a lot of money. They kind of just let them go someplace else, sign for a lot of money, bring someone in, hope they can kind of like manufacture that type of production. So it'll be interesting if they view that in the same sort of way. And I guess maybe that also goes to my next question about philosophically on defense. They still have Josh Boyer there as the defensive coordinator from New England, but I don't know how involved like Flores was as far as the defense is concerned, and whether now him being out of the picture, despite continuity for defensive coordinator, if that's going to make a big difference too on how they're going to want to approach things.
Yeah, there are a lot of conflicting reports out right now that that Josh Boyer called plays the entire season, or that Flores stripped him of that play calling, somewhere around week 8, week 9, when we saw that defense completely turn around.
Yeah.
And that the now jettisoned safety coach, Gerald Alexander, was more involved in fixing that pass defense than Josh Boyer was. But, speaking with McDaniel about it, I asked him, it was like, hey, man, like, you say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, is that why you kept Boyer on staff? And I think he was pretty adamant that, like, this wasn't just I don't feel like touching that defense, so I'm keeping him here. Yeah, like he vetted Boyer. He sat down and spoke with him for a long time. He came away convinced that, Josh Boyer is the right answer to keep leading this defense. So, like, that was a as he described it, a calculated decision to keep Josh Boyer on staff. I guess we'll see from here. That that defense can't afford to start slow like it did in 2021. Everybody blames the offense for that team's struggles last year, but, like, we knew what that offense was going to be. Like, nobody had high expectations for some, like, high powered, offense going to give Kansas City and Buffalo a run for its money. Like, you knew what it was. But the defense not playing well is why that team sucked for the first 8 weeks of the year. Like, they allowed the most yards per game in the NFL from weeks 1 to 8. They can't afford that kind of start here in 2022. And if they do, then I guess we'll kind of see, okay, maybe it was we know who's at fault. Like, maybe we know why, who was really behind it. Maybe Flores and Alexander did take over play calling. I know Gerald Alexander's wife got on Twitter and kind of suggested as much, and suggested that Alexander was highly involved in it. But and he did get an interview as a defensive coordinator for the Jaguars, but obviously was not retained here in Miami. But we'll see. I know players have spoken highly about Josh Boyer, publicly, at least. Again, there are conflicting reports out about how happy players are about Boyer being there. I can't speak to the truth or validity of any of it. As far as I know, Boyer's a good coordinator, and he made a good impression on Mike McDaniel, and that's why he's still here. Not sure how players feel about it, but yeah, I mean, any time that you have a offensive or defensive minded head coach, the coordinator of the side of the ball that they specialize in is always going to kind of be looked at, like, sideways. Like, okay, how much did you really do here? Like, how much of that were your ideas versus your head coaches?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, we'll figure that out. And okay, let me hit you with one last big picture thing here. So I was going through, obviously we mentioned, the winning record last season, 9-8, winning 8 of the last 9 games. But when I looked at, I tried to get a gauge of team strength by just looking at, if you want to play some of your hard-earned ESPN dollars, I don't know if you're allowed to do this, on the DraftKings Sportsbook, the 11th best odds out of 16 teams to win the AFC at plus 2,500. So only like a little bit less. If you look at the implied odds on that, that'd be like a 4% chance, like a 1 out of 20 sort of chance to win the AFC. Worse than last year. I looked up the equivalent number from last year, whereas this is a team that you would think at this part in the kind of rebuild, the real, like, that this was a Cleveland Browns and the Dolphins really did like the strip it all down sort of thing. So that was 2018. So we're talking about, was that 2018 or 2019? 2019. So we're talking
19,
about 2019, 2020. This would be the third year building up here. It's a team that's kind of stuck in the mud. Do you think that's a fair assessment, or would you assume, do you expect more of a leap from this team, I guess, than what the outside observers seem to be thinking about them right now, where no one's really that excited? I think there was probably more excitement around the team a year ago than there is now.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, they were coming off that 10-6 season. Like,
yeah,
they were so far ahead of schedule that you're thinking, like, wow, no, this is going to be a dangerous contender in at least the division and possibly the conference moving forward. These odds are, I think they're fair. Like, and Dolphins fans, don't lie to yourselves here, man. Like, there isn't reason to think that right now, as currently constructed, that this team is going to contend for the AFC, period. Now, it's February, and really think about that. Like, it is February, right? Yeah, it's February.
Yeah, you're in California. You're confused. I know.
Like, the draft hasn't happened yet. Free agency hasn't happened yet. We haven't been to like OTAs and training camp. Like, none of this has happened. So we don't know like what this roster is going to look like. So, I probably wouldn't place any of those hard-earned dollars on any team odds right now. But like, I think that's fair. I mean, like, you lost. Yes, you won. 8 of your last 9 to end the season, but they were against bad teams. You can only play who's on your schedule, like, and they were dominant in most of those games. But it is kind of concerning, in the back of your mind, it's like an itch you can't really scratch. That, okay, when they played Tennessee, when they played Buffalo, when they played Tampa, when they played Indy, when they played Vegas, like, they lost these games against playoff teams or playoff caliber teams. I know Indy blew their only chance, or blew a layup at the end of the year. But it is kind of a concern that they weren't able to hold their own against playoff teams, save for the New England Patriots, who Brian Flores, like, inexplicably just has their number. He knows how to beat Belichick. Go figure. But like I said, like, I think they're fair odds. You do have to reserve judgment though until this roster building and these personnel moves kind of take more shape and we get a better idea of what this team's going to look like. But yeah, as currently constructed, man, that's third in the AFC East. Like, this is a really good division. Like, it's like, they got to get out of that first. Like, they have to show me that they're capable of getting out of the division before I start, banging on the desk that they need to have better odds to win the conference as a whole. Like, beat Josh Allen and like, they beat Mac Jones, but still, like, beat Josh Allen before I'm here talking about you beating Pat Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. 2 of which they do play next year. We got, just prepare now for the Tua Burrow, Tua Herbert games.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing that Joe Burrow is now the greatest quarterback ever after that Super Bowl run. So that'll be interesting then. Well, you, Marcel, thank you for joining me. You're going to be busy, I have a feeling, during free agency with what the Dolphins are going to be doing. Follow Marcel on Twitter, Marcel_LJ. Anything else you want to plug? Anything else going on here, or is this like a resting time here to get ready for when those $65 million get spent this offseason?
Oh yeah, this is a resting time. I told you it's never been boring since I got here. So hopefully, at the very least, it can be quiet for the next month. We got the combine coming up here soon, and I'm sure that, like, a lot of draft, a lot of free agency stuff is going to start ramping up. But for now, going to enjoy this time out of town a little bit. Go through some of these nostalgia pieces, like the Kings jerseys behind me. Can't ever say.
Who do you got back there? Is that Mike Bibby back there? Who was that back there?
Oh yeah, both of these are Mike Bibby. We got the the weird royal gold jerseys that should probably never see the light of day again. And this one over here is so old that it's actually a Nike jersey, like before Nike took over, like the outfitting.
Those King squads where you had, Weber and Bibby and Vlade and Doug Christie and Peja. I mean, those are legit. I mean, that was a championship winning team, basically, multiple years. If it weren't for the fact that I'm from Southern California, my Lakers were there, and our referees were also there to help us along the way a couple of times.
I was about to say, as long as you recognize that the referees were yours, I was going to say we can go on. We've been on here for like an hour. We can go a whole nother hour on the Western Conference Finals, man.
Yeah, I mean, the refs were there, but then I also remember pretty distinctly. I guess it was the game 6 that everyone talks about, right? I also remember pretty distinctly I believe it was that game in an overtime. There was it got tight. It got a little tight from 3-point range for a couple of those shooters there on the Kings. Also, when it came down to it, and luckily, Robert Horry, he just throws it up at the end of games, and good things happen.
Yeah, it was pretty whack. I mean, everybody wants to talk about the Horry shot. Nobody wants to talk about the Mike Bibby dagger at the end of the very next game. I can still vividly remember where I was on the couch watching that game, like right on the armrest, and leaped over it. But no, tough era to talk about, tough era to remember.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near back. So I think that's what hurts more.
Things have been kind of dark there, but I will. You want to talk about, since we're in the like the Hall of Fame, sort of controversial Hall of Fame opinion. I feel like Chris Webber is someone who deserves a little bit. Not that I don't know if he actually deserves like to get in, sort of thing, but man, that guy was good. He could do everything too. He could do it all, and I feel like he's like kind of an underrated player for what he did, especially as a big man in that era. That wasn't just about like the post up sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he was way ahead of his time as far as just like an athletic point forward type of scorer, type of player. Could do a little bit of everything. I'm not going to say like he's not like as good as Giannis is right now, but like in that mold where he's just this 6'10" floor stretcher. Good for mid range, probably a little better shooter than Giannis was. If he didn't get hurt, if he didn't have those knee injuries, then I think maybe more people, his career would have lasted longer, more people would appreciate it. But no, man, Chris Webber was truly special as a as a scorer, rebounder, as a passer too, man. They had with Webber and Vlade, and they had two big men who could really move the ball better than most big men are expected to do. So no, real fun watching it, man. I might just throw old 2001, 2002 highlights on my phone while I help clean this house out.
There you go. Well, I know we probably lost everyone with this talk here, but at least what's good for Kings fans now is you can enjoy the Lakers implosion here. So you have that at least a little bit here if it continues. So anyway, Marcel, again, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone, thank you for listening. I'll be following up with you next week where we'll go through another team by team breakdown. Until then, thanks so much.